Chapter 6, Marriage Life. There's no need for that. He flung his blanket down. I'll sleep on the couch, you sleep on the bed. He thought himself a gentleman. It was only proper to decline. Lisa could fall asleep anywhere. But for someone like James, who lived in such a vast mansion, he wasn't a person who could adjust to inconvenience. It's all right. I'll sleep on the couch for real. I'm used to doing it at home, at your height. It would be uncomfortable to sleep on the couch, she said. She stood at his side and was prepared to pull his elbow. But before she could touch him, he blocked her with his elbow. Lisa fell down to the ground and glanced up at James, who had fully written off her good intentions. She offered him the bed since she wanted to get along with him. But a little touch upset him. Her rage began to mount slowly. Lisa stepped up and exclaimed, "James, are you crazy? Forget that I came to sleep on the couch out of charity. What do you mean by this?" James lifted his immaculate eyebrows, bent his head, and patted the portion of his elbow that she had touched. He looked calmly at the agitated woman beside him and remarked coolly, "Let me get one thing straight. You caused all of this to happen. You're suggesting that you were being kind. Don't you think it's a little late now? Even if I drugged you, I didn't make you push me down. You could have rubbed me off by yourself. But you shoved me down instead. I should be the one to complain," as she stated. She felt even more ashamed, but she refused to give him her bally. It was his fault for being such a jerk. It had not registered to James what rubbed me off meant. But when he grasped it, he thought it disgusting that a lady could be this rude. Another layer of ice seemed to settle over his face, and he pointed his slender finger towards the door. "Get out." Lisa paused, having no notion as to what she was thinking when she immediately argued with him like way. The more he stared down on her, the angrier she became, glaring at him. She jumped upon his back. "Oh no, there's a rat. It's so scary. Rats are my greatest fear." Since he disliked her, she planned to aggravate him even more by sticking to him. James stiffened up. When her soft, perfumed body latched onto him like a sloth, his body jolted, and he reflexively sought to shake her off. "Let go." He reached his arm backward to shove her off, but the two soft lumps pressing against his back kindled a blaze inside his body. His body froze. Although Lisa was relatively tall at 168 centimeters in comparison to James, who was at least 190 centimeters, she was much smaller. Her body was different from a man's. It was as soft as silk and as pliant as water. She clung to his body like a tiny serpent, making him understand that even though she was quite tall, she was very slim. Her pale fingers clung onto his arm and were reassuring, even though they were frigid to the touch. However, at this time, the lumps pressing against his back seemed bigger and more noticeable, and his body began to heat up uncontrollably. Damn it, the effect of the medicine should have worn off a long time ago. However, his body was plainly reacting. "I won't let go. There's a rat. I'm frightened of rats." She clutched onto him for dear life and refused to let go. However, she instantly felt his arm stretch out to clasp her waist. He dragged her off his back and threw her down, using the momentum. She held onto him and they both tumbled to the ground. When James regained his senses, right before him were her soft, pink lips. He could also see a slice of sparkling white teeth. It was like a passionate invitation that left his throat dry, surprised. James subconsciously pushed away the delicate figure that had fallen on top of him. Lisa felt a stabbing pain, particularly in the softest portion of her chest, where his arm had jabbed her. It hurt so terribly that she was tearing up. James had just begun to relax when he spotted Lisa sitting on the floor with her hands on her chest, while tears poured down her porcelain cheeks. Strangely, his heart lurched in his chest as he glanced at her shaking shoulders, somewhat frustrated. He regained his rationality and started reprimanding himself. He had really gone crazy. She was simply a girl in her early 20s. But she had been compelled to accept this marriage without love. After all, it was both their fault. She was not the only one to blame. Her sobbing left him at a complete loss. He did not know how to soothe them and could only stand there. "Sorry, I apologize this time. It wasn't your fault. I was too emotional, to be honest." I'm just like you. I haven't grown used to having a woman alongside me. I didn't shove you because I dislike you. Actually, I have a sickness that doesn't enable me to touch women. His explanation was unexpected. She raised her teary eyes in surprise and perplexity. He thought to himself, since they had to live together, he should tell her about his sickness. Letting out a breath, he added, I'm fine with men, but all women make me feel uncomfortable. It's not merely that I can't touch them. I will even acquire rashes, vomit repeatedly, and my blood will run backward. That is why I avoided you. Lisa did not understand. Such an illness exists? Is it a psychiatric condition? James sat there with his back straight as a ramrod. As always, he looked fully healthy. His eyes were as quiet as water in a well. He was used to this. After all, he had seen countless doctors for 30 years. He merely had to keep it a secret from outsiders. It's both. He stroked his temples with his slightly curved fingers. He seemed a little weary. You must keep this a secret from outsiders. I'm telling you only because we'll be living together. I hope you know that my family wants us to be married since they think you can reduce my condition. Since I touched you. So this was the truth. It was a pity that they were misinformed. In actual fact, Lisa could not heal his disease. She understood that what had happened between them was due to the things she had done. Lisa nodded her head in humiliation. Of course, it's not your fault that you're ill. Sorry, I touched you because I didn't know about it. I promise I won't touch you again. He stared at Lisa doubtfully. She stuck out 3 fingers. Her fingertips smooth and gorgeous. Her gaze was riveted on his as she smiled at him forcefully. James looked away from her and murmured quietly, Okay, let's go to bed then. Lisa nodded her head vigorously. She massaged her sore chest and stood up. I'll sleep on the couch. No need. James laid down on the couch. Putting aside her shame, Lisa didn't dare to touch him. Again, she found a blanket and dived under it after turning off the lights. The room was plunged into darkness. Their breaths blended into the air and circulated slowly. The couch was not comfy, so he kept shifting and rearranging his body. He could clearly hear someone tossing and turning on the bed, his forehead wrinkled with unhappiness. He could tell that she was sleeping deeply, but her sleeping posture was extremely unattractive. He truly could not get used to having a woman, especially one that he had slept with, share the same room with him. And so, he got up and walked out. Chapter 7, Madam Sarah, you do not need to be frugal next day. Sarah opened her eyes to unexpected surroundings. It took her a few minutes to realize that she was now married. But where was her husband? She jumped off the bed. Everything on the couch had been returned to its rightful spot. But the person on it was nowhere to be found. Sarah exited the room and headed to the dining room. The maid bowed to her from the side. Madam, I'll lead you to the dining room. The moment she arrived, she noticed James bathed in sunlight. She walked over with gentle footsteps. His impassive gaze immediately reduced the temperature across the dining area by a few degrees. His well-defined figure appeared even more upright. In a suit, without clothes, his figure appeared muscular, only to appear leaner with clothes on his face, which could make any woman heave a sigh. And his mysterious, dignified gaze made Sarah's brow raise slightly at just a short glance. Hi, good morning. She walked over to greet him. However, James simply raised his eyebrows and examined her once over. The casual clothing she was wearing had been prepared by the servants. They flattered and emphasized her shape. James buried his head in silence. With his skeletal fingers, he groped for the white ceramic coffee cup on the table. He did not raise his head again. How chilly and remote. Sarah pouted and sat down. Throughout the lunch, they did not interact at all. When they left, the maid looked at Sarah's unhappy face and stated urgently, Madam, Sir is not a bad person. Sometimes he's just grumpy in the morning. Especially if he didn't have a good night's rest. Sarah asked. He didn't sleep well last night. The maid said. Yes. Sir woke up in the middle of the night and went to the study room to sleep. So he didn't sleep well. Sarah opened her mouth slightly in surprise and was at a loss for words. She came to a realization. After thinking about it, he had been obliged to marry her because of the accident. Understandably, he probably felt uneasy, especially when he loved another lady. It was unlikely he felt happy sleeping with her in the same room. Sighing, she thought to herself, James is also pitiable. He's an extraordinarily fortunate person, but he's suffering with such a peculiar condition. Putting it this way, it was because she had carelessly mistaken him for someone else that he lost the lady he loved, and had to marry her instead. She instantly felt as if she had divided a pair of lovebirds, and began to blame herself. Sarah packed up in preparation to travel to the company. On her way out, she spotted a bunch of individuals heading out noisily. When she peered more closely, she noticed James guiding them. His tall and slim physique made her think of a crane standing amid chickens. His finely tailored jeans wrapped around his lengthy legs, which produced huge strides that were extremely smooth and attractive. His walk decreased some of the aloofness in his eyes, yet his severe stance carried a subtle indifference, and atmosphere of calm authority could be naturally felt. He unhurriedly strolled through the double doors and seemed like he was preparing to leave. Sarah raced after him in a hurry. Wait for me, wait for me. James's severe countenance changed upon hearing her chatter. His eyebrows were upon together. He turned his head to see Sarah, wearing a flattering dress nipped at the waist. She was running towards him like a madman. His brow furrowed even more. However, her waving black hair highlighted her white skin so that it seemed like snow. It made her appear cleaner and tittier. He sucked in a long breath, shifted his look away, and continued going out. Take me along, James. I'm heading to the company. I'll get someone to send you there. He stated curtly while looking straight ahead, though. Okay, you can. Just bring me to the bus station. There's no need to spend a car on me, James frowned. The Carter family is not so poor that their madam has to save money on transport by taking the public bus. His stare remained on her face, and after some consideration, he said, Get in. Hearing this, Sarah hastily staggered after James, anxious to save $2. James's automobile was big. It was not the automobile that they had taken yesterday. Inside, the seats were made of leather and had a fresh smell about them. James looked down at the traces that her shoes had left and scowled. Why are your shoes so dirty? Sarah looked down and noticed an unattractive footprint. She giggled in shame and replied, I don't have shoes, seeing James is immaculate. Eyebrows twist again, she pinched her lips and whispered, What are you dissatisfied about? It's not like I wanted it to happen. These are my only pair of shoes. James gazed at her. She was dressed missily and her slender, long legs could be barely seen. He scrutinized her clothes. It was the same set of clothing that she had worn yesterday, and she looked embarrassingly shabby. He answered, I'll take you to buy some clothes first. Hearing this, Sarah yelled out, My clothes are fine. It's simply that I didn't bring them over. When there's a chance, I'll go back, retrieve my belongings, and bring them over. But James had already directed the driver, Find a place where we can buy clothes for the madam. The driver promptly did a U-turn. Sarah was humiliated. It's really not necessary. It will be too bothersome for you. James brushed his eyes over her garments. He did not know where she had bought the dress. It had been washed so many times that it was definitely ancient. She had probably worn it several times. Your clothes are too dirty. I feel uncomfortable just looking at them. Fine then. Since it makes him comfortable, he can buy whatever he wants. To think that she had believed he was being polite. This is called being frugal. What do you know? You're used to treating shabbiness as thriftiness. But that's not a habit of mine. His eyes were, as usual, disinterested. Sarah answered, Yes, of course, it's fantastic to be rich. You can change your outfits every day. I don't have many, so I wear each piece of apparel for a long period. How many times do you suppose I've worn this piece? It costs several hundred yuan, of course. I won't throw it away until I've worn it out. James gazed at Sarah. The Carter family shouldn't be that poor. Sarah grinned while staring at him. So you investigated me pretty thoroughly, naturally. You think I would carelessly marry a woman without investigating her? Sarah fiddled with her sleeves. But didn't you just find out that I'm an illegitimate daughter of the Carter family? My father never treated me like a part of the Carter family. As a child, I lived with the nanny. It was only when he saw that I had grown up and had value that he offered me a room when I was younger. My clothing were always hand-me-downs from Olivia and Hannah. Even if the garments had been washed frequently or even ripped, they were still good clothes. I would always ask the nanny to fix them for me and continue wearing them. James's eyebrows twitched. As he looked at her, his gaze began to rest. Soon, the two of them arrived at a recognized fashion store. The moment they went in, James swept his look across the store and whispered to the salesperson following them, "Give me all the clothes in her size." Seeing how decisive James was, the salesperson's eyes began to light up. He swiftly brought Sarah farther inside. Sarah was a little dumbstruck. This was the first time she was experiencing how the privileged went shopping. Chapter 8. This chance encounter as flustering Lisa slipped out of her dress and into a gorgeous skirt. It wrapped over her torso and quickly brightened up her appearance immensely. Inside, Lisa tried each component one by one. The salesperson enthusiastically aided her with a terrific attitude. To the side, James sat neatly on a chair, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. Although Lisa had graciously declined, it was evident that she had never seen such a sight until they arrived. She wandered around the store, looking at everything with a continual wide-eyed wonder. It definitely seemed as if she had never worn fine clothes. However, when he raised his head, Lisa appeared before him in a jade-green gown. It enhanced her bright and pale complexion and rendered it almost translucent. She looked like a creek after a rain, refreshing and lovely. Her beautiful and slim legs were also exposed. On the whole, she appeared seductive and attractive with a sense of cuteness. The salesperson grinned as she commented, "This piece is perfect for you, madam. You look wonderful in it." Lisa was humiliated at the praise. James glanced on. It was apparent that she looked excellent in the dress. Although she typically looked untidy and uncultured, she today appeared graceful and was full of feminine charm. He could not help but take two more glances. When he saw Lisa turn her head, he swiftly averted his sight elsewhere. James was really satisfied. He signaled for someone to foot the bill and said to the salesperson, "Wrap up everything in the store that suits her and send it to the estate." Lisa was shocked. She gazed at James with light beaming from her eyes. He was too rich, naturally. The salesperson was exceedingly thrilled. She graciously guided them out the door and watched with jealousy as Lisa sprinted up to the gorgeous Porsche outside and climbed into the car. Soon, they arrived at the company. She thanked him before getting out of the car hastily. Emily escorted Lisa to the big hall of a 7-star hotel, where auditions were taking place. While strolling, she added severely, "There's a role for you to try out today. If you run off halfway as you did the last time, don't ever come to the firm again. You think you're Olivia. If you want to pick and choose your roles, then be like her. Even if she's not outrageously famous, at least she's a major celebrity. Otherwise, you must take your auditions seriously and quit coming up with ridiculous ideas." Lisa thought to herself. Olivia had the full financial support of the Carter family. Therefore, of course, she was famous. On the other side, her stepmother had gone to tremendous efforts to inhibit her development. Also, Olivia interfered any time she earned a role. Yet, she could not give up because of them. To do so would be the same as retiring before the combat had begun. Audition for the role properly today. Emily continued. The investor this time is very rich. He's from the Jameson family, a well-known and intriguing family. No one knows how rich or powerful they are. Even if you fail the audition, you'll undoubtedly make significant advances in your profession if he develops a fancy to you. Lisa was no longer listening. Her attention had entirely turned to Olivia and Ryan, who were approaching toward her. Olivia was slim and graceful, while Ryan was tall and attractive. When the two of them strolled side by side, all eyes turned towards them. "Wow, Olivia, that's probably her fiancé beside her. I heard that they're getting engaged soon. His family is quite rich, and he's a second-generation heir. Her fiancé is really handsome. They're a wonderful match. Olivia is really lucky." Before Lisa could turn around and leave, she heard Ryan scream out, "Lisa, why are you here?" Lisa froze and looked back reluctantly, she noticed. Olivia looked at her distastefully as they went toward her. Lisa smiled weakly at Ryan. I came for an audition. Ryan gazed at her clothes. He seemed to be thinking that she was different from her normal carefree and noisy personality. She looked a lot more refreshed and even gave off a feminine charisma. Where did you go? Your family has been looking for you. Ryan was still oblivious. At this situation, he only knew that the Carter household was in shambles. Hannah was always cursing Lisa, calling her an ungrateful wretch and a total ingrate. Lisa chuckled bitterly and gazed at Olivia's arrogant grin. I'm fine. I'll be staying with a friend in the future. I won't be going back to the Carter residence. Olivia protested to Ryan. Ryan, you have no idea how anxious the family is. She's too insensible. My mother stayed awake all night out of worry. But Lisa snorted. Her stepmother was probably unable to sleep out of frustration at having failed to sell her off. Lisa did not want to see her perform any longer. She answered coldly. I still have an audition. Ryan, you guys go ahead. Staring wistfully at Ryan, she clenched her fist tightly. Suddenly, shouts of exclamation emerged from behind them. They looked back in disbelief, only to see a neat row of the best bodyguards pave a passage to show James behind them. He was clothed in complete black like a knight of the dark night, mysterious and aloof. Lisa was stupefied. Seeing him here, she felt like she was dreaming. Olivia's glittering eyes were already drawn to him. She watched the tall and attractive man pass past her without so much as a side glance. With his arrogant demeanor and chilly forehead, he seemed like a towering ruler who did not permit anyone to approach close to him. Ryan. Who's that? He looks incredibly familiar, she asked Ryan, unable to hide her curiosity. On the other hand, Lisa wanted to bury herself in the earth when she observed James shooting a look at her. Olivia's exclamation suddenly startled her out of her daze. She observed Olivia lower her head and whisper, Is he looking at me? Lisa could not stand to be there any longer. While the place was in uproar, she fled out. After some while, she suddenly heard Olivia's voice from behind her. Lisa, it would be best if you go home. Lisa turned her head and replied coldly, I'm never going back. Olivia sneered. Don't think that I don't know about your motives towards Ryan. You're not good enough for him. He's about to get engaged to me soon and become your brother-in-law. If you're human, stop trying to flirt with him. Look at your situation. You're an illegitimate daughter, yet you still dare to entertain foolish notions about a rich young master like Ryan. Lisa's emotions writhed when Olivia glanced at her smugly. At first, you still had a chance to squeeze into the upper ranks of society by becoming the young madam of the Foster family. It's a pity that you weren't tactful. What? You felt that you may have a shot with Ryan if you're done. Can I leave now? If it was anyone else, she would have been okay. But she could not take it when Ryan was mentioned. Lisa took giant strides for the exit, but was yanked back roughly by Olivia. What kind of attitude are you showing me? Olivia sneered and continued. If you turn around now and lick the dirt off my shoes, I might let you have this role. Otherwise, as long as I'm around, don't even think about being involved in any significant productions. Chapter 9. Madam is auditioning for a role of flabbergasted. Lisa gazed at Olivia. Who do you think you are? Just as Olivia was going to hit Lisa to make her know who she truly was, her countenance suddenly altered. A tiny nervousness quickly showed on her gorgeous face as she continued gently. Anyway, you must come home soon, Lisa. I'm eventually your older sister, and I hope you'll live well. Lisa glanced in astonishment at her sudden shift in attitude and turned around. She did not know when James's distant and silent form had emerged behind her. Instantly, Olivia stared toward this man with starry-eyed devotion. Looking at his finely sculpted face, she pressed her breasts together as firmly as she could. Fortunately, she had just gone for some therapy and was looking her best at this moment. She had initially assumed that Ryan was already ideal. He was incredibly affluent and attractive. However, in front of this man, he would undoubtedly feel humiliated of his inferiority. It was evident from his remarkable aura that he was not simply any average man. Olivia was going to lose her wits from staring at the face that could make any woman shy. However, James only gazed at Olivia calmly before fixing his eyes on Lisa's worried face. She was as pallid as a ghost, a far cry from her warm and delicate complexion this morning. Her long eyelashes were twitching slightly, and her lower lids were tinged with a greenish-blue tone. She looked like a puppy that had just been abandoned. "Are you feeling unwell?" James asked, his face expressionless. Lisa shuddered. She raised her head with effort and answered, "No, I'm fine. Come with me." He did not spare Olivia a more glance. Instead, he marched straight ahead with long strides. Lisa froze momentarily. She gazed at Olivia's distorted face beside her. From behind him, James's assistant, Ethan, stared intently at her, suggesting for her to go after him. Without much of a choice, Lisa went after him. She left behind a pale-faced Olivia, who stood there and yelled in amazement, "Lisa knows him. That's impossible. Lisa is nothing. She can't even be labeled a D-list celebrity. But who exactly is this man? He has a magnificent look about him." Olivia was a connoisseur. She realized that the handcrafted Italian suit the man was wearing was not something just anybody could buy. That designer brand was exceedingly pricey. Ryan had planned to acquire it but failed to book a suit for the engagement celebration. Olivia could not help but feel a little jealous. She gazed at Lisa's retreating back with loathing. Lisa followed James toward the exit. "Thanks for your help earlier," she added to James. James did not move his head, but gazed at her obliquely. "What are you doing here?" Lisa remarked. "Oh, there's a role that I wanted to audition for. So I came to meet the director with the hope that I could get a chance to audition." James replied with an "oh" and scrutinized her azure green clothing. She looked gorgeous and eye-catching. "Okay, look for me here after you're done. I'll take you home." Lisa nodded. "Okay. But why are you here? This hotel is owned by my family," he continued. "Monotonous. So that's why?" Lisa thought in amazement. "A hotel this big." Lisa said goodbye and left to tackle her matters. Watching her leave, James went to his side and asked his assistant, Ethan, "She's here for an audition?" Looking at the direction Lisa left, Ethan responded respectfully, "Yes. Madam is auditioning for a role in a fantasy production that your family is investing in to market our hotels. Filming will begin soon, and Nathan is the male lead." James's eyes wandered to the door where Lisa had departed. He bowed his head and muttered to Ethan, "Go out and make some arrangements." Chapter 10. "So this is the type of woman he likes," Lisa added. "But whether or not you have money is none of my business since we'll be getting a divorce anyway." James laughed. "It's good that you are aware of that." Lisa got into his car. She stared at his flawless side profile and praised the gorgeous angle of his jaw. From the side, he seemed like a faultless sculpture. The more she looked, the more she began to sink into a fog. James took a glimpse and happened to see her legs spreading wide out, somewhat exposing her white safety trousers. Its outline was evident to the eye. His brows wrinkled. "Can you sit more properly like a woman?" Lisa stiffened. She lowered her head and stared at her dress before swiftly shutting her legs. Seriously, how could she have forgotten that she was wearing a dress? Lifting her head, her eyes met James's disapproving ones. She remarked in a nonplussed manner, "As if you've never seen it before." James's face clouded. "Can you bear some semblance of a woman? Will you not divorce me if I bear some semblance of a woman?" She reacted angrily, left James dumbfounded. This was the first time a lady ventured to yell at him. He was briefly unable to adapt. "Miss Lisa, I just hope that our marriage will be more comfortable for the both of us. Shouldn't you bear some responsibility for this too? After all, this entire affair rose because of you, huh? You're speaking as if I forced you to pull my clothes off that night. The only thing I did was make you hard. I didn't make you remove the clothing off me." James's face appeared even more tranquil. "But I remember that you enjoyed it greatly. You also hugged me and wouldn't let go until the finish. I even remember that you loved biting your fingers when you were excited. Your face also turned so red that it looked like blood could fall out of it." Lisa's face immediately flushed. Under his constant gaze, The heat in her face made her feel like she was burning. I don't remember at all. It must be your imagination. I definitely recall it being really painful. Because it was your first time, you knew nothing, and you weren't gentle at all. All of a sudden, his face came close and appeared directly before her as he stared at her burned face. He felt that she was gentle like this, her feminine charm flowing off her gently. There was a sense of mischief in his deep and dark eyes. Lisa quickly leaned back as she observed his gaze that was so deep it was like an abyss. The narrowed spacing caused the air in the entire car to abruptly heat up. It was as if something odd was festering. The warmth of his body extended towards her and made her bones resound at the apparition of a true guy. See? Just like this. He grinned as he glanced at the color of her face. Do you want me to take a picture and show you? Lisa smacked his hand away and sat back in her seat. They each glanced out the window like nothing occurred. However, the heat in the automobile was still noticeable and continued to build slowly in intensity. Lisa's cheeks was burning to the extent that she could not dare turn to look at the man beside her. How could she forget? That was her first time. But she had given it away so carelessly, and had been tormented so severely, with her hand on her face. She thought despondently, was her face truly so red? Then, the chauffeur shattered the uneasy air between the two persons. Sir, madam, we have arrived. Lisa opened the automobile door in a rush. However, her arm was quickly jerked back by the man behind her. She looked back and said, "What are you doing?" James said, laughing. "Why are you running away? Could it be that you're shy?" "Leave me alone." Lisa slapped his hand away and walked quickly into the house. As he glanced at her disappearing figure, James shook his head. James got out from the automobile carefully and leisurely. He was in a nice mood as he watched Lisa flee for her life. Lisa had only traveled a few steps when she observed an unfamiliar woman standing by the door. She was an attractive beauty, and instantly brought to mind the 4 phrases well-bred. "Young lady." Lisa froze. Behind her, James paused in his tracks and peered at the woman. He shouted out in a slightly scratchy voice, "Emily." Emily was his girlfriend. Once she saw the woman, Lisa appeared to understand what type of woman James actually appreciated. With her long hair blowing in the breeze, her bright and lovely features made her look just like a well-bred young lady from afar. She was clothed in a white, tailored jacket. Underneath that was a gray dress. She seemed bright, intellectual, graceful, and generous. It was evident with one look that she was a fair and wealthy beauty through and through. Lisa hesitated momentarily, apprehensive of what she should do. She could only look at them in a trance, conscious that she undoubtedly looked pretty ridiculous herself, with James standing by her. They looked like a wonderful match. She was obviously a stylish and fashionable woman. Naturally, she was not as naive as Lisa. If James stood along with her, they would undoubtedly be the golden couple in everyone's eyes. They would be the topic of everyone's jealousy. When she turned around and noticed Lisa, her delicate chin rose slightly, and she gazed at Lisa with an arrogant expression. After staring at Lisa for a long time, she then turned her sight to rest on James. Upon realizing the loaded scenario, Lisa could only gaze at James momentarily and answer sensibly, "Oh, my clothes haven't been washed. I'll go wash them now." She then raced into the house rapidly. James's brow wrinkled as he watched her sprint away embarrassed. He turned his head to gaze at Emily. Emily snorted. She pointed to Lisa as she exclaimed, "What kind of woman did you bring home?" James said, "Did you read the email that I sent you? I can't help that things have already advanced to this stage. I know that you'll be angry and sad. But all of this has become a reality. I didn't have a choice. This was a marriage that I had to accept because my family thinks that she can make my illness better. They wanted me to marry her. I could only agree to it. I know that it could be very difficult for you to accept it now because I just informed you. But this is a reality. If you leave me because of this, I will accept it. Hate me, criticize me, beg me for recompense. I will accept all of it. I breached our agreement. Therefore, I'll accept anything you want me to do." Emily's shoulders were trembling. "I don't want to hit you. How could I bear to? But I just want to ask you, what am I going to do? In actual fact, we're just strangers who've only known each other for a few days. Before the marriage, I didn't even know her name. My relatives forced me to marry her. I really had no option. When there's an opportunity in the future, I'll divorce her at this. Emily lifted her head and gazed at him, her eyes gleaming. With tears, really? James nodded. Both of us agreed upon this from the start. James and Emily were childhood sweethearts. It was only because he suddenly fell ill and could no longer touch ladies that they could not be together. The James family wanted him to find a lady who could bore him children. But any time Emily was around him, he would acquire rashes and his disease would worsen. Emily had tried everything, strategies from avoiding wearing cosmetics to taking medicine. However, horrible sores would still form across his body.